I spent $10,000 on my wildlife setup to hopefully get some seagulls eating french fries, but all I found was an eastern bluebird that was magical and he flapped his wings.
All I want is the perfect camera. All I want is the perfect camera.
So we have an interesting episode today. Went out to nature, took the Nikon Z6 III with the 600mm 6.3 prime, got a bunch of stuff, and we compare. And of course, Fuji just announced their 500mm 5.6 prime, so obviously I'm always looking to upgrade or downgrade or sideways crab step. So we'll go over a bunch of footage today and talk about switching to Fuji if that's on your plate. Don't choke. We're on the Z6 III now, 24mm 1.4, experimental low ISO. Everybody's always like the noise and the shadows. Now we're at the lowest possible. It doesn't even tell me what it is. LO 2.0. You can't go any lower. But here's our first shot. We got some ducks, of course. Rarest bird I have not seen one before. Today was my first, and I was like, wow. And there was dragonflies flying around out there. Come on, that's a duck. Bigfoot duck. They're different. I'm going back and forth between 6K 60 raw, 4K 120 with the crop, but it's also raw, and then HD 240 with a tiny minor 5% crop. Here we're in the shadows of the night. White balance, unheard of. Ducks for everyone. Don't shoot me. I don't taste good. I promise you that. I promise you. I've tried almost every wildlife setup you can think of, from Canon full frame mirrorless R5 with the 100 to 500, Nikon with the prime, Fuji with its zooms, Sony with the zooms, because they have no primes that are affordable. I've tried everything, Olympus, Panasonic, everything. So far, Nikon is the best for everything. Just the look you get, very special, very sharp, very stable, very good autofocus, eye detect, everything is like brilliant. You'd be dumb to switch out of it or even contemplate other systems. But could you save money selling this Nikon system and then going into Fuji, and then you have the Fuji magic? You could. You wouldn't be capturing turtle magic with a father-son team hanging out on a twig, and then they glance over at you somewhat. And like, you would not be getting that. You'd be very much tighter on this Fuji. Oh, we'll get to you, crop boy. But hot damn, it's hard to compete with a full frame system once you have it. Yes, this is shaky only because I was leaning on a railing and people were walking on this bridge, and I was like, oh god, that's ruining my footage. It's not Nikon stave. You're a loser. Now, the internet loves to lie to you, but from what we know right now, the Z6 III weighs 755 grams. I just weighed it. And that 600mm lens weighs 1603 with the lens hood and no caps. That's how you use it. The Fuji, that information is not available. They only give you some mystical weight. Oh, it's 1335 without the hood or anything attached. So you got to add at least 100 grams to that. And I did that for you. So say you're going Fuji X-H2S, because that's their best video camera. If you're trying to compete with these specs, nothing will be in focus ever. That's 660 grams, much lighter. And the lens, even with the lens hood, still lighter. So we're talking 2358 grams for Nikon, 2095 for Fuji. Is that going to be noticeable? Almost 300 grams. Slightly. You'll notice it, but not much. It's not like, oh, I went aps-c to save the weight. Your back is still going to snap in half, and the bears will laugh at you. But what you're getting is more reach. So this turtle was 900 light years away from me, and is it the best shot of our time? Not really. No. So the Fuji, as we'll discuss with all the crops, you could have got almost a headshot with that Fuji, because hot damn you, crop boy, you crop good. This is the worst example. I saw a snapping turtle like 3,000 light years away, and it's like the ugliest thing I've ever witnessed in my life. The framing, the exposure, the no background blur, it hurts my soul to even witness this. But if you're on the Fuji, not only are you aps-c cropping your way through life, you're also cropping in slow motion. So if we're doing 6K 60 raw here, there's no crop. So you're getting your 600mm 6.3. But if you're doing 4K 120, 1.5 times crop, and Fuji has an insane crop, 29% on top of aps-c. So we're looking at 900mm Tony 9.5 for Nikon in 4K 120 versus 985mm Tony 11. Very similar looks at that point. You're almost comparable. I would say like the bit extra reach will be offset by the lack of ton. You might even have more ton with the more reach, I doubt it. But here's the biggest difference between Nikon and Fuji in my opinion. When you're doing HD 240, which is the best spec for wildlife, is so fun and magical. We're doing only 5% crop here, so that's a 630mm Tony 6.6 on Nikon versus an unheard of 1050mm Tony 11.8. That's gonna be a very different look. Very different. Like, that's almost twice the reach and half the ton. So like, you have to ask yourself, what are you filming? Are you too close to your wildlife? Because there's ducks. Ducks exist. I got close to these ducks. Nikon latched right onto this one in the middle, and it did not get confused. It did not bother searching for other ducks. It's like, okay, they were coming up, expecting to be fed. If I had the Fuji, that would be right on the eye, basically. Like, only the eye would fill the frame. But some of the shots further away might have looked better. Personally, I find 600mm to be almost perfect for everything. I've almost never found a shot where I'm like, that's not good enough, 600. Like, of course, it's always fun to punch right into 1,000. It's like, oh wow, the headshot. But if there's movement in the scene and the bird's gonna fly, the tighter is the worse. Like, you get some environmental shot where the bird's just like this big in the frame and then he flaps. And it's like a scene versus like if it's this thing in the frame and then it's like, gone. I demonstrated that perfectly. Now, I stumbled upon a unfortunate Canon user. She didn't realize that there were other better options, cheaper and less crippled, but she pushed on. She saw something in the bushes. It was actually just a leaf blowing in the wind. She wasted a lot of time on this shot. It wasn't even a live bird or animal. She was later eaten by a pack of squirrels. They took her bag first, searched for nuts. That lens is bullshit. By the way, it's only 500mm and it's a 7.1, and you're disgusting. You have to turn the barrel like 17 times to get to the end. But hot damn, how do you leave Nikon? Like, what are you even thinking at this point? Like, when Fuji announced that there was going to be a 500mm lens, I was like, okay. I hadn't even bought my Nikon Prime yet. So I was like, that might be your system. But they took so damn long to announce the thing. Even though the GFX lens is the same lens, they could have announced it that day. But they did not. So I went into Nikon, and now it's like, you're gonna have to pry that out of my cold, dead hands. Like, why would I ever leave it? I know for a fact that Fuji's gonna hunt like the business of a duck hunter for focus. There's zero chance that you're doing animal eye detect, although I often switch into manual anyway, because you never know. Sometimes the depth of field is so little, you have to go for it. But like this shot, I just pointed it up at the sky, Nikon tracked it. I was like, okay, that's the shot. It's annoying to try to track a flying bird hawk when it's manual focus. It can be done, and I have done it. And Nikon captured the perfect landing, but he unfortunately did not choose one of the branches in front of the tree. Yeah, that happens. Thankfully, I hiked up the mountain to get a better vantage point, and I don't know what he's eating. Tell me what that is. What is that? A giant prehistoric moth? Was it a bird? Like, it had huge wings. I've never seen anything like that flying around. What the hell was that? A baby bird? A dragonfly? Was it a wasp? Some type of hornet? But that hawk's a dickhead. And we're in 6K 60 RAW, and it's noisy as all hell, but red LUTs save the scene. Do they not? It was a pretty magical day, I tell you. Those hawks, they turn their head like an owl. I didn't realize they had 360 cams built into their neck. That's quite the thing, those hawks. And having 6K 60 RAW, you can punch in, kind of. You do lose detail. Don't let anyone ever lie to you and say, oh, no problem, you can crop in. Sometimes I'll switch into 4K 120 for the extra reach, but I don't know why I even do it. It's kind of pointless. Just stay in 6K 60 and crop and it'll be sharper anyway. There's zero reason to ever use this mode. I might even delete it from my left-handed mode dial. So then I'll just have 6K 60 and HD 240. If I didn't have either system right now, Nikon or Fuji, what would I do? The Fuji, it's a lot cheaper and a lot lighter for that system, especially if you find some of these things used, and slightly lighter. But just like you lose all reliability of the autofocus, and then you're not getting RAW internally, but that comes with less noise anyway, so that could be good. But I like having the RAW for some reason. It's just more detailed and scratchy. But they're both very similar spec cameras. Like you have 6K 60 instead of Fuji's 4K 60 with no crop. They'd probably look fairly similar, but like we're both doing the same specs, just slightly lighter. And Fuji Magic, is it the same as Red Magic? I would argue that Fuji Magic is slightly more magical. I saw a giant red mosquito. He looked over at me, and the tunnel was realized at its full potential. I asked him to fly away, but he didn't, so I asked my friend to walk over there. This is the closest minimum focus distance. I realized he was staying put, so I was like, okay, I'll creep a little closer. Okay, there it is. So that's the shallowest depth of field you'll ever get. That's the most macro you'll ever see. And it's not bad. The Fuji, I bet you that'll have way more macro, especially when you're cropping in HD 240. It'll be like just as you could have some magical moments, I tell ya. And then I asked her to walk over there, and she walked into my shot. Unfortunately, that kind of ruined part of the scene, but there he is, HD 240. Flapping those wings. You can see why I need HD 480. This isn't slow enough. But like if you're filming that at 24p or something, like grow up. What are you even doing? Why are you filming wildlife? You're bored. You're not entertaining me. You're not inspiring me. That's for sure. So slower the better. But Nikon kind of leads the industry in the telephoto game, the wildlife. Like they went for it hard, and they have many primes at every focal length. If you really wanted to compete with this Fuji in the reach, you would get the 800mm, but that's much heavier and way more expensive. Then I would say it's an easy victory for Fuji. If you're comparing the 800mm Nikon Prime, like that thing's heavier than my Sony 200 to 600. This 600mm Prime is way lighter than that lens, so it's like easy. It's almost feeling like I'm aps-c already. But like if that was your game, maximum reach, to compete with the Fuji, then wow, easy Fuji victory. It's not even close. It's so much lighter and cheaper and joyous to use. And then you manually focus, and maybe that'll work. What I don't know, maybe one of you jabrones that owns that lens can tell me, how's the manual focus throw? Because on the 100 to 400, it was like way too many turns. It was like not sensitive enough, and you couldn't change it in the menu. Can you change it now in the menu, or is it good enough? Because I like a nice sensitive, like, oh, it's very easy, but 600mm enough, kind of. Like, that's a good scene. Would you have liked to see this magical blue bird that no one's ever seen in their life? Yeah, it would have been nice to punch right on in on him, but I got a little closer. He looked skittish, so I was like, okay, better get at least something, because sometimes if you don't, and then they just fly off when you get closer, and it's like, well, at least I have something. I documented that bluebirds exist, and then I got a little closer, but some hiker asshole was coming towards him, and then he flew off. Now, the magical blue wings of life have taught us one thing: be patient and quiet. So for me personally, I don't think it would be worth selling off my 600mm Prime, and then I could probably afford getting this 500mm lens and a body for like similar price to just that lens, and that would be cool, but then your results are much worse. I would feel like that would be a downgrade until Fuji comes out with a body that beats my Z6 III, and then it's like, okay, well, I can't get 4K 240 on Nikon, I'm going to Fuji now. And then you have your lightweight system, and it's like, wow. And a new film sim called Spaghetti. Don't call it that. But right now, I think Nikon leads the industry in wildlife. If you can afford it, it's not cheap. But like if you're a dedicated squirrel hunter, you need something good prime, Nikon's your way. Although you could get just any bullshit setup and be good enough. Like an Olympus EM1 Mark II with the 75 to 300 lens, super light and ghetto, and you'll still get magic. So it's like, don't stress about it. But if you're reaching for the top and you know, like you saw an owl once and like you're in a forest, you're spotting like robins, then you spend the money that we all deserve. So do you think Nikon wins? I agree. Do you think Bitcoin is leaving your wallet and entering mine? That could be nice. And are you subscribing for more?